Welcome to the first episode of the Homeschool Oklahoma podcast. Homeschool Oklahoma is the state organization for homeschooling in Oklahoma. We promote, protect, and encourage privately funded Christian homeschooling in the state. Our goal is to help you build your family through homeschooling in the name of Jesus. The goal of this podcast is to help homeschoolers, specifically Oklahoma homeschoolers, take full advantage of everything the state offers to homeschooling. We'll be talking about everything from why we homeschool to what resources are available in Oklahoma for homeschooling families. My name is Jonathan Bartlett, and I'm one of the board members for Homeschool Oklahoma. If you want to know more about Homeschool Oklahoma or want to support us by becoming a member, go to homeschooloklahoma.org, go to the website, click the Join Now button, and become a subscribing member. Now, for this first podcast, I wanted to bring in the president of Homeschool Oklahoma, Paul Rose, to talk about why homeschooling is important. So, Paul, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, you're welcome. Glad to be here.
So, first of all, I want to start out, how did you get into homeschooling?
How did we get into homeschooling? Well, my sister had done homeschooling before we started. And so when our child was small, we were kind of looking at the landscape of public education, private education, and we were aware of homeschooling, although this was in 2001 or 2. This wasn't exactly a very popular thing to do at that time. And but it looked good for our family. So we attended a seminar to learn more about it. We did a lot of reading, and then we just started doing it.
So did you start from like when your kids, did your kids ever go to school, or did they start homeschooling?
No, they started homeschooling. Our children have never attended a public or a private school.
Interesting. So Did your motivations for homeschooling change as you went through the process?
Well, they did. When we started, we thought we'd only do it for a couple of years. It was mostly about just not having our children leave our home when they were really young and tender. And, my wife really, we were doing a good job already teaching them, colors, ABCs, tying their shoes. It only made sense that we could continue to do that process. And but that changed as we went on. They got to third grade, and we're like, oh, well, we don't want to do that now. They hit the middle years, and we're like, well, we don't want to go to junior high. That's even a stranger world. And then by the time they got to high school, that motivation had changed from baby being, wanting to teach our children with a biblical worldview and kind of do it the way our family wanted to do it, to now being, we think this is the best form of education to prepare them to be out in the world. Because at this time, in the high school years, they had people skills that allowed them to talk to younger kids and adults comfortably. They had already all started some of their own businesses. They were handling the topics you needed to go to college and do those things. So we just saw that as a better finish to education than ever going back into any kind of institutional school.
So when you started, you weren't necessarily planning on going the whole way?
We weren't. We actually, I don't think we knew anyone that had gone the whole way, and so we didn't know what that looked like. Mm-hmm. And it really wasn't our goal. As we educated longer, we became more and more convinced this was the best way to educate our children.
So what's something specific that really stuck out to you as far as how home educating worked or looked or resulted in differences?
So for our family, I think probably one of the best things is I have some flexibility in my vocation, and so we could plan our school more around when I had peaks and valleys in the work I did. And so we had some great family time because I wasn't constrained to an already rigid set school year. So that was beneficial to us. It also is when something exciting was going on or something that fit with what we wanted to be, learning about or something like that, we would just do it, and I could maybe take off a day of work and participate with them. Or if we had 6 children, so there was a lot of pregnancies and a lot of babies, and so it gave us the flexibility to kind of take a month break when a child was born and not have all this pressure on our family from just things that would have typically been required for us to do. We no longer were required to do that.
So it really just you were able to knit in your education into your family life. It sounds like.
Yeah, that is the best way of putting it. Family life was first. Education was part of our family life, part of our family discipleship, rather than being the other way around, where outside influences were telling us how to run our family or how to schedule our family. That's probably my favorite part of it, is our family got stronger, grew closer together, because we were the focal point of our family life, not some outside influence.
Yeah, that's one thing that really, when I was deciding whether or not to homeschool, I was thinking about back to my own education. I actually, for a public school experience, I think I had one of the better public school experiences. But some of that, I feel like I got lucky, because a lot of my primary attachments were to my friends at school, not to my family. Now, thankfully, I had good friends at the time, but there was no control that my family had over that. And so I can see that, being able to put your family discipleship first was, something that was really important to me when I started homeschooling as well.
Yeah, I had the same experience. I went to public schools at Moore High School. This was back in the 70s. It's one of the best public schools in the state at that time. And I didn't have necessarily a bad experience. I got a good education. Now, but the part, that's not the end goal. I have two brothers and a sister, and I'm close to them, but we didn't really grow up together, because in a school institutional system, you divide yourself by peers, and your friends often supersede your family relationships. And as we homeschooled, our children had friends, but they didn't necessarily supersede our family relationships. So my children are very close to each other. They like to be with each other, and we like to be with our children. So I like to see it as a twofold thing. Our kids got a great education, but they also got this added benefit of a close relationship with their family and their siblings, which I kind of think I didn't get when I went through school. I had friends that were my peers, but I didn't have friends that went up and down, in age.
That's one thing I noticed. The first year we were at a co-op, I was surprised that I was able to see all these students that were there were students who were middle school students who were super good friends with 7-year-olds.
Yes, that's what we saw too. We loved that part. And the same way the other way. Our children could have a conversation with an adult, and it wasn't necessarily uncomfortable for them.
Yeah,
because they were having conversation with adults. So it wasn't like, if we were in a crowded room that, they were afraid to talk to anyone other than their own age. I love that. And it wasn't just our children. That was pretty well almost all home educated children that we were co-oping with or doing like that. They had a vertical age relationship as strong as they had a horizontal age relationships.
Yeah.
Very, very positive thing. And I think it helped them as they moved into adult life too. They respect older peers, younger peers, and equal peers. Equal peers? I don't even know if that's a thing, John.
We'll go with it.
We'll just go with that, yeah.
So tell me about discipleship and homeschooling.
So, when we started off, it was about school, and everything was, we even did, we're that family when we first homeschooled, we had the school room, and we had some little desk, and we had the flag in the corner and the alphabets around the corner.
Did you have a chalkboard?
We had a whiteboard because we were progressive.
Yeah, that's more fancy, more fancy.
But we kind of laugh at that now, but that's the only model that we knew. And so that's what we were mimicking, and that was the way our education mimicked. But as we went along this journey, we realized that it wasn't just about getting the math tables right, getting the grammar right. It was really about the hearts of our children. So that's when we realized that what we're really talking about is not home education as much as it is home discipleship.
Yeah.
And we love that term better because it's really education. If you're talking home discipleship, education falls under that umbrella. And it's not the other way around. It's not home education and discipleship falls under education. It's the other way around. And so that's the way we viewed it. It was, we're educating or discipling the hearts of our children so they are lovers of God and they are prepared and capable of serving however God calls them to, whether that's a PhD professor or a plumber or a stay-at-home mom or a corporate executive running a business. Whatever God calls them, we want them to be prepared to do that. So we chose to disciple a biblical worldview, and we chose to educate a very broad view with our children. They had some say-so in it. I mean, if they had a bent, we were happy to go with that bent with them. But aside from that, we wanted basic educational choice, topics, along with some kind of an artistic outlet, music outlet, and we encourage some kind of an athletic or sport type physical outlet too.
Yeah. So now there's a lot of different options that people have for homeschooling. There's these days there's like virtual public schools. There's Epic. You can go to Union High School virtually.
Yeah.
You can do one of the charter schools like Epic. What is your opinion on the best way to do homeschooling?
Well, we think my wife and I both believe homeschooling should be in your home, and for a couple of reasons. First of all, traditional homeschooling, constitutional homeschooling, however you want to define it, is privately funded. You don't receive government funds. And if you're going to go to a public school, charter school, whether it's one of the ones that were truly virtual like Epic, or whether it's an extension of one of the bigger public schools, I mean, you have to know that that's public money. And so you're going to have to educate according to their guidelines and rules and curriculum. And they may tell you that you have a lot of choice, but you don't have as much as you think. All you have to do is just object to something that they're teaching, and you'll quickly find that you're not in control of the curriculum, and you're not in control of the topic and the material. The school system is. And if we're not publicly funded, if we're doing that ourselves, then we get to choose the curriculum, we get to choose the content, and that's very, very important to us in terms of that.
So what you're saying is that when you go with something like the public school, but it's virtual, or you go with the charter school, those are still funded by the state.
They're still public schools. They just have a different name.
Yeah. So they're in a different location.
They may be in a building, what we call brick and mortar location, or they may be in a virtual location. But be assured, they're still directed by the Department of Education of the State of Oklahoma, and they still have to comply with the laws that our legislature has passed regarding state schooling, which is going to be very specific to the topics and the content. But even outside of that, which isn't as scary as it sounds, then you move into the content that's required just from the Department of Education or from the local school board that may teach your children things that you don't believe in. They may teach values that are contrary to your worldview, and you don't really have an ability to change that. That's directed by the state.
So constitutional constitutional homeschooling.
Yes.
That involves so that's entirely privately funded.
It is.
And so when you do that, that means that you have full control. No one else is telling you how you have to homeschool.
That is true. So here's one of the cool things about Oklahoma. We have in our Constitution, that's why you and I are using that word, constitutionally homeschoolers, we have the ability, our Constitution tells that we do have to educate our children. That's a requirement by our state. We are required to do that either through public means, private means, or by other means. And that was written in our Constitution so that because of the way we were and the time we came in, that parents had the ability to teach their children outside of the state-controlled educational system. So you have public, which is definitely by the state, you have private, which is not under the state, and then you have other means, which is even also not under the state. So do we have controls? Well, yeah, we have a control. We have to educate our children. That's in there. And
Right.
we have some case law that says we have to do it well. But we don't have the state telling us exactly, you have to use this math curriculum. You have to teach this form of history. You cannot teach Bible from this position. We don't have any of those constraints. Some people kind of freak out about that, saying, well, how do we know your children are getting a good education? And I'm like, well, first of all, we love our children, so we're not going to give them a bad education. But I think, importantly, even outside of what we know, the statistics that come out say that homeschoolers or score higher than public and private education on most everything, which is good. Now, every kid's different, and
averages are different than specifics.
And I think intelligences are different. You don't ask someone who's highly artistic. They may not necessarily be the STEM star in terms of science and math. Likewise, a science and math may not be that violinist over there that's excelling. So intelligence, I think, is all over the place. And I think we only, in our institutions, only value written word intelligence. In other words, if you can read and write, you're smart. And if you can't do that, then you're not smart, even though you're brilliant at something else. And so I think that we've lost some of the ability to look at how unique God creates all of us and how we can do different things. And I think the other thing too is just, homeschoolers are excelling well in colleges these days. Many of them already have great self-teaching skills because of the environment they're in, and so they do well in college because of that. I think also for us, I've heard this concept, and I don't know a lot about it, but there's IQ, intelligence quotient. There's EQ, emotional quotient. And I find that often, because of this approach that we've done homeschooling, that EQ is better. Homeschool children sometimes perform much better in work environments because they're already used to the multi-age, multi-stuff, chaos, self-directed things that you find every day in a work environment that you do not find in a school environment. And so they transition into that environment very well.
Yeah.
And so I kind of like that part of it going well too.
So the why is so you're the head of Homeschool Oklahoma, and
Yes.
and that's Homeschool Oklahoma is a specifically Christian organization. Why is it important for Homeschool Oklahoma to be a specifically Christian organization?
Well, it's our roots. It's where we came from. So when the homeschool movement began in the 80s, it was mostly directed. Most of the families were Christian families that were responding quite a bit to the public schools saying that you could not teach religion in schools. That Bible was out of it. You couldn't pray in schools. You couldn't do any of that, and saw an intrusion into that worldview. So I would say that most families were making that choice back then. So that when our organization started, it was a distinctively Christian-based organization. And we have maintained that all the way through. I think it's important for a couple of reasons. One is, biblical worldview is an important part of our education. It's a part of many of our families want. So having that leadership in there and how we view social norms or the wide variety and changing things that are going on these days, we have a constant authority that's higher than the state or just whatever society wants it to be that week, and that gives us a steadiness. And some people might say, well, I'm not a Christian. I don't want to be part of Homeschool Oklahoma. It's like, well, we don't require you to be a Christian to be part of Homeschool Oklahoma. Our leadership is required to sign a statement of faith. And we would love for you to have that faith. But we're going to start in Homeschool Oklahoma. We're going to start with the fact that we believe you have the right to teach your children. You have that parental right. So we're going to represent that in the way we go to the state legislature. We're going to represent in the way we talk about things. We also believe that you have the right not only to educate your child, but we think you have the right to choose how you want to do that. So, we're obviously not public school parents, but we think you have that right to send your children to a public school or to a private school or to teach them at home. We think that's your choice, not the state's choice to tell you how to do that. And so I see it as a circle of these circles. We believe in parental right. We believe in educational choice. And our focus is on public or privately funded, parent-led education. And even so on that, our leadership is on that from a Christian worldview.
So basically, because Christianity is giving us the basis for having the right, for having the duty to homeschool, but you don't have to be a Christian to partake in those rights.
Right. But here's some things that the Christian worldview presents to the world that I think is important. Number one, we believe that God created everybody uniquely and special. That translates into how we educate. We don't look at our children as robots. We don't look at them as all the same. Each one has their own bent, their own personality, what their passion is. And so a Christian worldview in education allows you to recognize that we're all created differently and should be allowed to educate and express that differently. And I think that's important. I also think that we also, if we're striving to believe in our Christian teachings, that we love our neighbor as ourselves, which means we have this social construct that says, our home is this great beacon in our neighborhoods. My children interacted with the people. We had elderly people lived around us, and they didn't go away every day somewhere and never see our neighbors. In fact, they saw them every day, and they went over and helped them with their gardening, or they helped them take out their trash. They were part of our street community, and I think that was also living out our Christian beliefs that we had to love our neighbors ourselves, that we served our neighbors. I love that having our children at home kept our house alive all 24/7, and we were there during ice storms and outages, or this neighbor needs some help going to the hospital, or this lady's redoing her garden and she wants to pay my children $5 an hour to go over there and de-weed it. Those all built wonderful relationships with our neighbors, which none of them are anything like us.
So you're growing them in the whole life of the community, and not just in one specific area.
Yeah, we lived on a very diverse street. We had every kind of economic position and different family structures, and I think we had pretty well the whole gamut on our street, and of about 8 houses, and it was fun. We always worried they wouldn't like our children because we were that weird homeschool family. But from what I could tell, what they told us is they loved our children, and they loved our family, as maybe weird as we were. They loved the fact that we were around and that we cared about them. So
that's great. So is there anything you wish you'd done differently?
Oh, wow, that's a good question. Off the hand, I would say no. I think I don't know how well a job we'd done if we knew what was in the future for everything we did. So I'm kind of happy that it was just one step at a time. As any dad, I think, out there, I would always wish I had more time at my home rather than work. I don't think any guy doesn't want that. And, it'd be nice to be a little more involved in the home education part of it. I helped out, but, the kudos go to my wife, Valerie. I mean, she's the one that did like 90% of the work.
Right.
My job was to make sure that she was taken care of and encouraged, because this is hard work to do this. And, I didn't, she's the love of my life. I want her to enjoy doing this. And so my job was to make sure, if I could, to do that. And I taught some of the topics that I like. I'm an engineer by profession, and so I love that STEM stuff. So, if there was, some weird physics stuff to do, I was all over that.
Did you do anything really cool?
Oh, I did some weird stuff. We built a trebuchet, which is a French war engine, if you're not familiar. if you've watched Lord of the Rings, those things that fling the flaming balls of fire over the walls, that's a trebuchet. And we built one that could fling a gallon of water down our block. It was great fun.
That's awesome.
The worst part of that is when I was building an experiment, I took it out into a field on a trailer and put a bowling ball in it and still had my car hooked up to the trailer. And you have to kind of fine tune these things to know where they're going to throw. It threw the bowling ball straight up.
Ooh.
It came down in the triangle of the trailer where it hooks to the back of my car. I don't know how that happened, and buried itself about 8 inches in the mud. And I'm like, okay, that worked really well, and I need to move my car right now because I was going to put it in. Yeah. And we did stuff. When I taught physics, I always said whatever the physics book said should be the experiment. We should make that 10 times as bigger. So if they say, swing a ball around a string so you can learn centripetal force, that was fun. But what's better is to go get in a car in a parking lot.
Sounds like an episode of Home Improvement.
Yeah. I was kind of like that guy, including wrecking some stuff too.
Nice.
So I'll tell one more story about funness. So we love the Little House on the Prairie stuff. And so part of our curriculum was we were doing something where the kids were building, prairie stuff or something. I don't remember what the topics were. But so my son had built a cabin, log cabin, out of some old bushes and our twigs that I cut up on the wood pile. And he built this cabin. He did it per scale for the Playmobiles, and they played with it for a week or two. And then we came home or we were looking out the backyard, and there was a fire in our backyard. And so we ran out there. It wasn't a big fire, but it's like we realized, Andrew, what's going on back here? And he's like, oh, well, we're doing the prairie fire thing from Little House on the Prairie. So they were letting the yard sweep over and burn the cabin up. And it's like, okay. That's okay. They remembered the story, and they know how that works, and they understand a prairie burn also. Not that we want that in the middle of Tulsa.
Right. Well, awesome. Well, thanks so much for talking with us today, and we'll probably have you and your wife on more to come.
Well, that'd be good. She'd probably correct half the stuff I say if she was on here. But thank you, John. It's been fun to talk about it.
All right, so that's been an episode of the Homeschool Oklahoma podcast, and we hope that you like, subscribe, and give us a 5-star rating wherever you are listening to podcasts. Have a good day.